Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat. Let's all go to the lobby.
Hello and welcome to Movies vs. Capitalism, an anti-capitalist movie podcast. I am Frank Capello.
And I'm Rivka Rivera.
And we have some exciting news right here at the top of the show. We just found out a couple days ago that this podcast, Movies vs. Capitalism, has been nominated for a Signal Award for Excellence in Podcasting. This is different from the Ambi Awards, which we were nominated for last year. This is another award show for podcasts because there are multiple, I guess. But we were nominated for Best Television and Film Podcast. So, Riv, congratulations.
Yay! Very exciting. Yeah. We're very, very pumped.
Very pumped. We are up against Jeff Probst's Survivor podcast. So
a big deal for Frank and I.
I know that Jeff Probst is probably a listener to this podcast, so I just want to let him know that we are fucking coming for you, Jeff. It's your turn to get voted off the island. But no, this is super cool. And so there are two separate awards. There's the Signal Award, which is voted on by like their panel of judges. And then they have a Listener's Choice Award. So if you are beautiful listeners would like to support us, you can go to vote.signalaward.com and cast your vote for us, Movies vs. Capitalism, before October 17th. That's when they close the polls. Our category, again, is Best Television and Film Podcast. So make your voices heard.
And additionally, we shared this on our Slacker episode, and we got some lovely responses, and we'll be writing to everyone. Thank you. We just wanted to share it on one more episode in case you didn't listen to Slacker, but you're listening to this. We are looking for someone to help us with editing this podcast. As you know, it's just Frank and I. We share the labor of editing, recording, booking guests, all of the things. And we just realized it would really help us out a lot to bring a third person onto the team. So we would be splitting everything, 3 ways. We would figure out
We would do a socialism. We would do a socialism.
Yeah, we would do a socialism. Like a mitzvah, but a socialism. So, if that's something you would have time for, interest in, ideally you would have editing skills already, but we could also potentially teach if you have like a lot of passion for it. So yeah, just write us if that's you.
Yeah, if that sounds interesting to you, shoot us an email at moviesversuscapitalism@gmail.com. That's moviesvscapitalism@gmail.com. And thank you again to everyone who's already written in. Yeah. We're going to get back to everyone shortly. Just want to give some time for, as Rivka said, people to hear this message. I think a lot of people will listen to the Hook episode, so I think this will reach some people.
Yeah. All right. Well, before we get to Hook, it's a great episode. I just finished editing it, if I do say so myself. But before we get there, we'll keep it brief, but I'm so curious because you and I haven't talked about this at all, and I wanted to know your thoughts about Chappell Rowan, and there's kind of like a little bit of discourse around what she said about not endorsing a political candidate. I think, so it all started with an interview she did in The Guardian where she said, quote, "I have so many issues with our government in every way. There's so many things that I would want to change, so I don't feel pressured to endorse someone. There's problems on both sides. I encourage people to use your critical thinking skills, use your vote small, vote for what's going on in your city." And understandably, not because I understand this perspective, but just because
of the internet.
It's what I would expect in the system that we have. People freaked out. People got very, very angry. And so then later she went on and did a TikTok, I thought pretty well, like articulating further, but pretty passionately why she said this statement.
I just woke up and to like people just skewing it even more. Endorsing and voting are completely different. I don't agree with a lot of what is going on with like policies. Like obviously fuck the policies of the right, but also fuck some of the policies on the left. That's why I can't endorse. That's why I can't like put my entire name and my entire project behind one, because there is no way I can stand behind some of the left's completely transphobic and completely genocidal views. So yeah, there are huge problems on both. You know what is right and wrong, and so do I. Fuck Trump for fucking real, but fuck some of the shit that has gone down in the Democratic Party that has failed people like me and you. And more so, Palestine. And more so, every marginalized community in the world. So no, I'm not gonna settle for what the options that are in front of me. And you're not gonna make me feel bad for that. So yeah, I'm voting for fucking Kamala. But I'm not settling for what has been offered because that's questionable. It's questionable that our actions of our government, the actions of the internet, the actions of you and me. If this is what you are not understanding, you know what? Endorsing someone, if someone is publicly endorsing a political figure, that doesn't even mean that they're gonna fucking vote for them. Because as I said in my other video, actions speak louder than words. And I'm not gonna let this narrative of like me playing both sides. No. This is not me playing both sides. This is me questioning both sides because this is what we have in front of us. So if you look at my statement and you're still like, she's just playing both sides, like she doesn't wanna, no, you're not getting it. I'm critiquing both sides because they're both so fucked up. Voting is all we have right now in the system. And so I encourage it yet again. Vote for who, in your mind, is the best option for what we have right now. Because it's all we can do. And I hope this makes it clear that no, I'm not picking the sides of what we have right now. Yes, one's obviously better than the other. But Jesus fucking Christ, I hope you don't settle for what we have and put your name behind someone that you don't fully trust.
Yeah, so I mean, I was curious your thoughts. Like, I thought it was refreshing to just hear someone say, think critically. I'm not going to just, I get that I'm and this is kind of what's happening with her. I think she's pushing against the idea of what it means to be a celebrity and saying like, I understand I'm a celebrity. I'm not going to, and I know what that means. And I'm not just going to endorse without thinking critically. And I, of course, love that she names that the Democrats have failed many people in her many marginalized communities. They failed Palestine, which she names. They failed a lot of people. And so why would she just automatically endorse? I thought it was like a lot of really important, maybe not perfectly said, but so different than what we're accustomed to seeing.
100%.
Sure.
She is what I think Antonio Gramsci would call the organic intellectual. Like she is clearly, she clearly has a point of view that comes from lived experience, from witnessing, especially in the last year, and she says Palestine, witnessing what the Democratic Party has been complicit in. And I just checked her age. She's 26 years old. So like this is a younger person who all they have seen from the Democratic Party and now the formative years of their life is a support for a genocide. And I completely I agree with almost everything she said. I think she needs to refine her critique a little bit, but I'm not coming down on her for that. She clearly was just trying to deal with this fucking bullshit that she's been barraged with.
And the thing that people forget is she was asked in an interview, who would you be endorsing someone? The question was about endorsement. And I think the response was about the nature of what it means to endorse, which I think is interesting. She was answering the question.
That I think is, that was her strongest. I mean, the only issue I took with it is her saying the left, which is which is historically not liberals or the Democratic Party. So that's what I mean when I say that, refine your critique a little bit, say
or just language,
just not even critique.
Easy.
Language.
Easy.
Yeah, just it's not the left, it's liberals, it's the Democratic Party establishment. And being specific about those things helps what you're trying to say. But I thought everything that she was saying was spot on. And you're right, the idea of endorsing versus voting, I think, is something that we don't ever interrogate. It's not in the United States. It's if you say you're voting for someone, you must endorse everything that they stand for, everything that they've done, all of their policies, all of their history as a public figure. And I thought it was really coherent and smart analysis from her to say look, I'm going to vote for Kamala because these are the choices that are presented to me, and I am I am making my compromise in this moment, but I'm not endorsing her. I think that's like a very mature take to have.
Totally. And in such an important nuance that so many people don't talk about, because there's this push to, again, the vote blue, no matter who, you have to fully put your body and soul behind it and endorse. And how much power is lost there when it's like, hey, I desperately want to vote for the Democratic candidate. I'm going to desperately ask you to make that possible for me. Stop sending arms to Israel. Stop this genocide. That's all. Like, these are the conditions under which I would need
it's
to
also
get there.
Fucking absurd that a 26-year-old pop star caught this much heat for what is like a very reasonable perspective that she has. I saw one tweet that I thought summed this up really well, which was something along the lines of, wow, the liberal establishment is really grilling and scrutinizing Chapel Roan so much harder than they have President Biden or now nominee Kamala Harris at all in the last year. And I'm like, yeah, that's 100% correct.
Yeah.
Anyone who was up in a tizzy over what Chapel Roan said probably hasn't given a fucking single thought to what Kamala's policies actually mean, to like what her actions up until this point have actually said and demonstrated. And on that alone, like this whole thing is bullshit. So like good for Chapel Roan. We should get her on the pod.
Absolutely. That would be fucking awesome.
If everyone knows international superstar Chapel Roan, please send us her personal email address. We'd love to reach out. All right. Should we get to our hook conversation?
Let's do it. But before we do, we just want to remind you, our audience, that we don't sell ads on this show. Instead, we rely completely on your support, our community, to keep the show going. And you do that by subscribing to our Patreon.
For just $5 a month, you get access to our new bonus episodes, plus our entire back catalog of bonus episodes. And you can find our Patreon link in the episode description, in your podcast player, or at mvcpod.com. Also, please take some time to rate, review, and subscribe to this podcast on your podcast player so you don't miss new episodes and so other people can find the show.
All right, we are going to take a break, but we will be right back with our conversation about Hook with our guest, Larry Powell.
Hey everyone, we've got an amazing organization we want to tell you about called Anti-Capitalism for Artists.
Anti-Capitalism for Artists is an education-based community dedicated to raising the class consciousness of artists.
Their core offering, the 10-week Intro to Anti-Capitalism course, is designed to be accessible to anyone looking to get familiar with a wide range of anti-capitalist concepts and ideas.
They do this by offering an eclectic array of free virtual and in-person events year-round, geared to meet all manner of knowledge backgrounds. Frank and I both took the course in different cohorts, and it really was amazing. You get to meet with a group of people who are interested in anti-capitalism, you build solidarity, and it's also a lot of fun.
Yeah, they put together such an amazing, comprehensive reading list from anti-capitalist writers from all different types of tendencies, from Marx to Black radicalism to intersectional feminism to queer liberation to modern-day anti-capitalists. So you really get a firm grounding in a diverse and wide array of concepts.
Artists of all kinds, abilities, and professional statuses are welcome to join A4A's community, where they can learn, build community, and co-create their own events and offerings.
You can learn more, reach out, or support their work by donating at anticapitalismforartists.com or find them on Instagram at anticapitalismforartists.
Love you, comrades. Now back to the show. All right, today we are joined by our dear friend Larry Powell, they, them. Larry is an award-winning Infini-hyphenate artist from South LA, known for his work as an actor, writer, organizer, and director. He has starred in notable plays like The Christians, Father Comes Home from the Wars, and Brokology, and recently appeared as Rick James in MGM's Hotel Cocaine. As a writer, his series The Gaze has earned multiple Emmy nominations, and his film Mother's Milk won a special jury prize at the Seattle International Film Festival. He's a staff writer, actor on 3-time nominated The Miss Pat Show, and is an adjunct lecturer at USC's School of Dramatic Arts. Larry is also the founder of Powell House of Arts, whose latest project, Passion, survival source material for the betterment and preservation of our people, is a groundbreaking multimedia endeavor combining film, theater, and documentary to uplift Black queer voices. Larry invites the community to support the project through donations to help cover production costs and ensure fair compensation for all involved. Additionally, he is currently starring as Linier in Cyrano at the Pasadena Playhouse's 100-year season, marking his first time performing at the historic venue. You can learn more about Larry at powellhousearts.com. Welcome, Larry!
Welcome, Larry.
Yay! Thank y'all.
God damn, Larry, you stay so busy. That's one of the most impressive CVs we've gotten to read on this show. I also really appreciated you spelled theater Theatre as opposed to ER, which we know is the correct way to spell theater.
Right.
Yeah. Full disclosure, we all met in theater school.
Yes, that is true.
Yes.
So we all spell it the same way. and that's not even the full bio. Like, there's so much more. There wasn't even stuff about your organizing, which I know people say, but like, you're the real deal. Like, you're out there bringing your art into the streets, as well as doing all of the work that we just shared. So it's really great to have you, especially on this podcast. It's always great to see you, but I'm really excited to have you on. I know you're someone we wanted, like, early on, we're like, we would love to get Larry on the show.
It's a blessing to be here, honestly. And thank you for centering that. Yeah, I try to get away from it. I try to, I try to just, act as if I'm just making a play or a film or some other form of artistic contribution, and it always just ends up being about the people, for the people. And it's something that I'm learning is truly just in my bloodline. It's in every step that is divinely orchestrated for myself. And the more I surrender to it, the better I am. So it's difficult. Like, spent all day yesterday at LA City Hall speaking before council members and with incredible people in support of an issue, and then had to go do a play, and I was just like, here I am again. I wasn't even trying to. I just told someone I would come and help them. All of a sudden, I'm speaking in City Hall. It's just, and I have to honor that as I'm 38 now. We met, 2006, 2007 or something like that. And so thank you for centering that.
Of course. I mean, but that's one of the things that I'm always inspired about you as an artist is not only is that something that just feels like they're not separate paths, like your artistry is so tied to that organizing work and tied to what you do. It's what I believe makes you such a great artist. I don't think those two things are separate, but I relate to the journey of trying to navigate. Are they separate? Do I separate these things? In which ways does our system of capitalism want to make those things separate? And so I think it's really, I know it probably makes the work that you then go and do on the stage later in that day only the more filled.
It did. To be honest, I actually experienced that last night. Yeah. And I get the chance to know that it's not a one-time thing. Like, that Carnegie Mellon trained, low-key, potentially traumatized, they'll heal through that. Human artist is like, oh, do you have to go to City Hall every day in order to have that kind of an experience on stage? And it's like, no, you just have to understand that that's always, like Rivka's saying, always at work. That's always at work. It's always been at work. I was protesting and advocating and organizing at Carnegie Mellon. I was doing it at my Oakwood Secondary School and high school. I was the president of the diversity leadership group called Cultural Awareness, and was at diversity leadership conferences since I was a kid. Like, I was always talking about equity, diversity, and inclusion since I was 12. And before that, grew up through the riots and with, grandparents who were Black Panthers and huge people who were politicians or gang members or just people who worked at the county in LA or people, you know what I mean? And pastors and preachers, and always community, always working to stop in the middle of the road and hear my dad say, hey, that's a mother and her children. As they have guns drawn, as we're driving down South LA, he stops and says, that's a mother and her children. That's a mother and her children, you know, not just someone who you think may have done something or have evidence that they have. that's a mother and her children. And I was like, oh, and you're a father with your children, and I'm watching this. So I think it's wonderful that we're talking about the film that I chose today, because that actually maybe all ties into it.
Mm.
Yeah, that sounds right on about, like buying into systems, having systems shape us, finding ourselves again once we have been conditioned by those systems, relearning our humanity. Huge themes in this movie. So let's just start. Let's just dive in, because Larry's told us this is one of his favorite movies. Full disclosure, this is one of my favorite movies. This is like in a top 10 spot. Today, we are talking about Hook, the Peter Pan adaptation directed by Steven Spielberg. Story written by Nick Castle and James Hart, with a screenplay by James Hart and Malia Scotch-Marmo, based on the book and characters created by J.M. Barrie. This film stars Robin Williams, Dustin Hoffman, Julia Roberts, Bob Hoskins, Maggie Smith, and Caroline Goodall. The budget was $70 million and it grossed $300 million worldwide. So nice little hit there. And if you have never seen this movie, we will be spoiling it. This story follows the high-powered and high-strung businessman Peter Banning, played by Robin Williams, who travels to London with his family to visit their great-grandmother Wendy for the holidays. But when Peter's children, Maggie and Jack, are kidnapped, Granny Wendy tells Peter he is in fact Peter Pan. Yes, the literary Peter Pan, and that he must travel to Neverland to rescue his kids and discover why he chose to grow up into a lame old man.
Okay, some historical context for when this film was released. Released on December 11th, 1991. George H.W. Bush is president. On January 12th, Congress voted to authorize the Persian Gulf War, and 5 days later, Operation Desert Storm begins with airstrikes against Iraq. In March, 4 LAPD officers are indicted for the videotaped March 3rd beating of motorist Rodney King during an arrest. In July, President Bush nominates Clarence Thomas as the replacement for the Associate Justice Thurgood Marshall to the Supreme Court. Thomas was confirmed to the court later in October. And in December, the Cold War finally ends as the president of the Soviet Union, Mikhail Gorbachev, resigns and the Soviet Union dissolves. So this was quite a year.
The opposite vibes of this movie, like a very heavy year, and this is such a light, fun movie. Larry is aghast right now.
I am gagged. Like, whoa.
We do that because sometimes the context tells us something about, why the film was made, the time it was made. It gives a little additional perspective. This one, not so much. This is...
Oh, really? I would say that this is really informative, but we can get into it, because I think so much of what this contrasts is like kind of what the film is, the Peter Pan-esque, is trying to say, whether it's escapism or the power of imagination. But I think this gives a lot of context for why a movie like this would be made at the time. But before we go there, Larry, we like to ask our guests, why did you pick this film to talk about on this podcast?
Number one, I just have to say, and I have to bear witness to, like, I am already verklempt. Like, I'm already like I am moved, like almost like honestly to tears. Yes, I'm a Cancer with an Aries moon and a Gemini rising, but I think that, I find that y'all just really helped me understand that I can be my own liberated self in a way that really makes deep and wide impact through my artistic contributions, and with it also always organically, authentically, and even so radically at times, like leaning on the work that I'm also doing and being connected to the work that I'm also doing in these streets or in these schools or in these otherwise spaces I occupy or am in some sort of parallel existence or plural existence with. I think that, like, you telling me, setting that context and saying that, the riots were happening and I lived through that, and like being like the little kids and seeing my parents go out into the streets, seeing my streets, literally remembering the fires, and like, having a babysitter, like being like the little kids in Hook, And like that's what was going on. And just to think that like that's where I found this film, or that's when I found this film, like with all of the stuff that I went through with my own dad and my own mom and my own grandparents, and the stories and the this and the that, and always wanting to somehow fly, and leaning on and counting on my imagination, sometimes even for a way to escape, a way to cope with drive-by shootings, and otherwise, like, disparities and all these kind of things that were happening due to redlining and all types of like being like survivors of the crack epidemic, and then parents still dealing with that, and like me like going to the that is amazing. That context saves me, because it shows me that you can still make a film that could be like a 70 million, 300 million, a big hit, and it can feel somehow disconnected, but it can also be intrinsically connected to the greater context. That is good for me to know. Thank you for listening to all of that.
No, it's beautiful, because what I was going to say early on, what I was going to say early on, Larry, something that I am so impressed by your life and your work, at least from how I have viewed it, is just like a truly uncompromised vision for what you want your work to look like, sound like, feel like, what you want it to say. And I mean, and I'm sure you are listening to that being like, I've compromised a shit ton, but at least from the outside looking in, that always struck me. Like, Larry is really like telling the stories that he wants to tell. And that's so impressive, especially when you're actually working within the quote unquote entertainment industry, which constantly wants you to compromise the stories that you're telling, the voices that you're representing. So I think rooting our conversation in that, and about, staying true to yourself. And then in this movie, the metaphor is like growing up versus not growing up, I think is like a really smart way to enter into it. And it was the thing that like, I mean, I watch this movie at least once a year, let's be real. But, this is the first time I was watching it within this context of like talking about it on an anti-capitalist podcast. And I was like, oh yeah, like not growing up is a metaphor for like not buying into the system, or not letting the system change you, and not letting the system make you into a compromised, what turns out to be like less happy, volatile, angry, unsatisfied version of yourself. So
and I just want to say that was brilliant, and I just want to say I feel like I did what they were doing on that debate. Like, I did answer the question, so let me let me answer the question. The reason why I chose this film though is because I also feel like I have to watch it once a year, and I needed to see the part in the film where the youngest Black child goes up to Peter, played by Robin Williams, this adult man's face, and stretches and like clay, like seeks and molds and just looks for that innocent, imagination filled child, the true self, and looks for Peter, and in an attempt to show the rest of them that he's still here. And I love the moment where he says, he goes, "There you are, Peter."
Chills, tears. That was my notes. It was just like Peter. Unbelievable.
And I need to see that. I like have to watch that every year, because it's like, there you are.
Yeah.
And they all come over and they're like, to see the unseen, to see that which may not be on the surface, but like it's buried underneath all of this like growth and these battles with capitalism, and these ways in which we have to show up in order to be grown. And think, when I was young, I thought like a child, but when I grew up, like there are scriptures about it. It's like so much about like leaving the child behind. It is just like, no, actually, we can't.
I loved what you shared about that, and that moment blew my mind. I don't watch this every year because I will share my early childhood, like the Glenn Close scene where she gets put in the boo box. That really traumatized me early on. So it took me a while. come back to this movie because that was a lot for me. But that moment, rewatching that now, I wrote down, I was like, this is the process of radicalization that I at least have seen my friends go through, that I feel that I've gone through. I feel that in our culture, when you say radical or radicalization, because of our education system, because of, you know, the Red Scare and all of that, the way that our political society has put in our heads is like radicalizing is a bad, harsh, evil thing. At least those are the words that I've just picked up and inherited and associated with it. But in my lived experience and what I've witnessed is like the process of radicalization is this gentle and this profound. It's a coming back to a deep human knowing that. And in this movie, especially in that moment, I feel like sometimes childhood can, there's like, it's playing games, it's being roughhousing, it can be a little gendered in some parts of the movie, but this was the truest, and we got to give props to that little actor, is everything. The time, it's such a mature moment, it's such depth of like knowing, you feel like times, you're like, this little human is every age ever lived, is just touching Robin Williams' face, taking all the time needed, not a moment missed, every moment is truthful. And to me, I was like, that's what it feels like. I feel to like come to radical in the sense of coming to the root of a truth, of a knowing and understanding, is like that image.
It's also so pure because, I mean, from like a production standpoint, you have all of these child actors on set. And, you know, I'm sure like some of them have probably taken acting classes, have like a little bit of technique under their belts. But for the most part, these kids are like, they're just telling, you know, Steven Spielberg sitting this kid down and being like, all right, so you're just going to like play with his face like it's putty until you find him. He's underneath there, you know? So it's just like these child actors are playing. They're playing a game. They're playing a game within the scene. And most of the scenes are rooted in play and gamesmanship and like having fun with one another. It's just like, what a perfect, sweet, and simple metaphor that's just distilled into such a clear physical representation. Also, gotta say, on this watch, I was like, that little boy looks exactly like David Alan Grier. Did anyone else catch that? That was that is a miniature David Alan Grier for like 100%. That's it.
I had to look up the human's name, and it just said Isaiah Robinson. They are Isaiah Robinson, and they play Pockets in the film.
Wow.
And I need to know who they are. I was just thinking that as I was watching this time. I think I've looked.
How many
them up
lives
before.
changed from that like moment of a performance?
Just that
Pretty
moment.
cool.
Like just that moment, and I love the gender conversation. I hope we talk about that a bit too.
Yeah.
The lost boys of it all. I was just like, you know, it's such of a time, you know, as I like, for me, I don't find myself feeling the safest in a space that's like Black men's group or like, or even like Black women's group. Clearly it's like, but it's like, there's this in between space that I am in, these liminal spaces that don't really have spaces. That's why I seek to like create them. But it's interesting. It's interesting to me because for me, I think that Peter Pan is a role that it's always been gender nonconforming. And so I think Peter Pan in itself, I think is pan. I mean, like for me, I mean, I'm pansexual. I'm gender nonconforming, expansive. I really like to say, because it's so much more than gender for me. You know, it's interesting, this role, this vessel can hold so many spirits. Like, why do we then have to be like Lost Boys? Or why does it have to be all these like, it's like this very masculine, patriarchal, which has to do with like the movie business. Sometimes I think historically is about fathers and sons. And I think, again, like for me, that has always been so interesting because when I was younger, me and my dad loved that we were movie buffs together. Like, you know, he would say that a lot, like, we like movies. And I would be like, yeah, we like movies. And like, we did. We were always watch movies, like really watch them, a lot of them. And just the in and out of the life of my dad due to incarceration and the carceral systems and these ways that Black men are criminalized and Black and brown humans are criminalized, and just torn apart, the family systems and the structures. It was crazy to grow up in that, really feeling like I didn't have a dad sometimes. And so sometimes for me, when watching this film, I think it really hits on an experience that I went through as a kid, you know, and having a sister. I'm oldest of five, but having a sister that's 16 months apart from me, 16 months younger. I always felt like very, 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 this movie is a mirror
Mm.
in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought that was one of the strongest parts of the screenplay was the relationship between Jack and Pan and like what that all brought up, particularly the idea that it's set up where they're like Peter's in mergers and acquisitions and land development. Like they're very clear on the like material reality of what makes Peter a shitty capitalist and that's what growing up is. Because they could have made a choice to, you know, I guess it wouldn't have brought as much conflict, but it like they didn't have to make it so clear that like the financial aspects of this human being's upbringing is what pulls him away from his family so much, right? They're clearly like upper class family. Jack, the son, I had a note where I was like, okay, we're on his side, but he's a little shit. So, you know, he's a little spoiled brat, like on the plane banging his ball against the window. I was like, oh my God, Jack, please. But they make it clear like this is because his dad's like on that 80s cell phone, never with the family. I thought that was like a very clear example of how even the capitalist class is not winning under this system, right? Like they're being robbed of this childhood as well.
One of the most instructive lines in the movie is when they first see Granny Wendy and Jack is telling Wendy about how, you know, Dad, he just goes into all these other businesses. He's like this hardcore businessman. He just blows them out of the water. He just, no mercy, destroys all these businesses. And Wendy's like, Peter, you've become a pirate. So they like very early on link this idea of like the businessman shark, like the pirate of mergers and acquisitions, and then the actual pirates of Neverland, and like conflating them and being like, this is bad. We don't want to be this.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I love that. I thought that storyline was really effective. And then following this, you know, that he has to get back his kids' love and adoration by refinding his imagination, refinding the human inside and connected to truth.
And that was his happy thought, being a dad.
Mm-hmm.
So interesting.
The whole parenting theme in this, I'm glad you brought it up, Larry, because I was like, for the first time in a long time, or ever maybe, I was like, what actually happens in the original Peter Pan story? Because I haven't seen the Disney movie in a long time. I didn't have any real recollection. And just like
Did you have that musical? Did you two watch the musical, The Mary Martin? I had that on tape. That was my movie. It was Mary Martin, Peter Pan, Raisinets commercial at the top. I love that musical.
Wow.
I've seen it at some point, but no, it was always, I was a Hook household. Like I maybe saw the Disney Peter Pan a few times, but like
I was a
pretty quickly, I was like, I think I prefer Hook. But in the original Peter Pan, Wendy, John, and Michael, their parents aren't really characters in it. They're not absent, but they're not around. Like we hear their voices, but they're not there. There's not like a strong parental presence in there. And then the reason that Peter wants to bring Wendy back to Neverland is because he wants her to be a mother to the Lost Boys. So the original Peter Pan is like loaded with these ideas about motherhood and children and caregiving. And I think it's like interesting and smart that in this they kind of flipped it, and it's like, no, this is like a little bit more about fatherhood now that Peter has assumed the father role in this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But yeah, the Lost Boys thing versus, you know, if it had just been Lost Children, I just chalk that up to, I don't know, early 20th century patriarchal standards in literature. Just like, well, the hero has to be like this fun boy and the damsel has to be this girl, and you know, so like she's gonna go take care of all these like little messy boys in Neverland.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's even deeper than that. I think it's one thing that really struck me in this watching was how I felt like two conflicting things. I was so moved by the message of imagination and rekindling with like who you are in the moment we talked about, of like, there you are, Peter, and like having that experience thinking about, yes, this is our role as artists to like come back to this place where if we see the food, it appears. If our imaginations can see it, it can appear. And then I was also conflicted by feeling like a little bit sad of how limited their imaginations actually were. and how Neverland is actually not really this imagination utopia. So much of Neverland to me felt like a colonial imagination, and they were all
Ooh,
stuck
yeah.
there. Like there was actually nothing past that. Even, and I was, I was like, I didn't remember the movie so well. And I'm like, are we going to have, their Tiger Lily moment? Like I was like kind of bracing myself because the second they said Indians, I was like, oh God, what am I going to have to see here? Like what is coming up? And they didn't go there fully, but I know that's part of like the really hard part of this story, but it's not, I mean, I think sometimes when people talk about it, they're like, and then there's that, but let's not talk about that. But I think we have to, because intentionally, I think a lot of this is about, like I said, the colonial imagination. And there's a reason that like Peter grows up into the person he does, and I was thinking about that too. I'm like, even though he forgets and he grows up, his modeling was pirates and war. And there's just so much of their play is actually replicating violence, which struck me as like, I don't know if if that would be, if there was more matriarchy in there, if they had more, I wonder if how much of that results from like the fact that you're like, what is up with Neverland? Neverland to me was not, I want to see a Neverland that's like a true utopia that they could surpass. There was still a lot of things that I'm like, they still need to fight past that stuff, because it's not, there's still a lot of problems in that space, and I could see why Peter would want to leave, to be honest. Like, I wouldn't want to stay there forever personally. Even Maggie was like, they take the boy under their wing and he can play bass. When she's like, there's that scene where she's singing the song that her mother taught her, and then she looks back, and I was just icked out by all the adult male pirates like gazing at her. I thought that was really creepy, but also like makes sense. I think they're like, this utopic imaginary world still is bound by patriarchy, colonialism. It's not really a free space. And I think it says a lot about the work that we need to do as creators to even move past that, and how much is like we've inherited that is still, that we kind of speak to as like, that's a story of imagination, and we can build on and break free from.
You know what, first of all, everything, it just took me to church, thank you. But I was like, because it brought up for me, the moment when Peter chooses to grow up is when he chooses to kiss the daughter of
The granddaughter.
Yeah, Moira, the granddaughter, while she's
thank you, the
sleeping,
granddaughter,
by the
while
way.
she's sleeping. And then
No
so
consent.
for me, exactly, the conversation of consent came up. And, me growing up in the Black queer, I know it happens in a lot of spaces, but like the Black queer space and club space and drugs and alcohol and people like kissing me while I'm asleep, or saying that I kissed them when they were asleep, when we were making out, we were both going out of consciousness. And I was like, what? Like, no, I would never. But then being a survivor of so many things and how I have to be clear on that, and growing up in that, the gray space, these murky moments, I think that it really is a product. It's something that capitalism and its friends, racism and patriarchy, rely on. I think it relies on this like individuality or individualism. I will be the one. And I feel like right before I was having breakfast, and I was just, when I'm about to like speak on a podcast or whatever, I just pay very close attention to like what the universe is showing me. And as I was sitting, there was a human in front of me with this shirt that says, I am, and an arrow into we are. I have, arrow, we have. I can, arrow, we can. And I was like, there's it. That's it, right? That's the hook. Like, what's the hook going to be? Like, the hook for me is that it may seem as if you want to be, or you need to be the one, or you need the one, or you need to be, you need to be the drum major. Like one of my favorite Martin Luther King sermons is called The Drum Major Instinct. I listen to it almost every year as well, multiple times a year. It really talks about that instinct that in all of us that is like wants to be the first. I want to be the best. I want to be it's the drum major instinct, and how that actually is the sickness. Like that actually is the thing that when it's not checked, when it's not monitored or regulated or, you know, maybe neutralized. I actually don't know the word, but when it gets out of control, that's where we get hooks.
Mm-hmm.
That's where we get Peter kissing Myra, you know, in the night because he don't want Wendy to grow up. But like, I don't want to grow up, but you can grow. Wait, what's that? Let me kiss your granddaughter. It was like, wait, like, and it like what? Like, huh?
What? Yeah.
You know? And so I think though that happens in a world where you don't have a mother.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And I love the text around that. I love the lines with the very most clear character to me in the film is the daughter. And
Maggie.
she's like, no,
Adorable.
Neverland.
Yeah.
What's her name again?
Maggie.
I'm so bad at that part. Yeah, Maggie. She's like, no, Neverland makes you forget. She's like, no, like that's my dad. Like, no, like you need a mom. I love her calling out everything. She tells Hook he needs a mother. You know, and I just, it's so real. It's so great. It's yesterday also, a friend of mine asked me what is the kryptonite to toxic masculinity. What might be a space where toxic masculinity cannot or struggles to live or thrive. And for me, what instantly came up was a mirror, a tear, tears, a healing circle, a loving embrace, care, community, you know, staring into the eyes of a dying trans child. Like, these things for me are the spaces where toxic masculinity, which to me is just another way of saying capitalism or patriarchy or anything else like that, imperialism and racism. It's you need a mommy. So
that makes me feel like there was a failed opportunity with Hook.
it is. There was. Let's hold it
Like,
accountable.
why did Hook have to get, like, they could have had a better, like a more
They could have
beautiful
rehabilitated Hook.
transformation. They could have rehabilitated Hook, because Hook is really interesting too. Like, I think Hook's obsession, it's as you're talking about this, the drum major and this sort of like fighting this kind of piece of yourself that you have to fight. And there's so much about that in the themes of Peter Pan with the shadow self, right? And Hook has this, Hook's clearly hiding stuff, you know, under the wig, and just is not owning all of that, and is therefore obsessed with war. Like, is obsessed with the war to end all wars. And I'm like, who does that remind you? You know what I mean? Like, that just feels like, yeah, that feels like our political system is like war to end all wars. And actually, I'm going to wait till, because it's about the war. It's not even about getting what he wants. He just wants the war because there's profit in war. There's things that you get from war. So he's like, I'm going to wait. Actually, I'm going to give you 3 days to be prepared for war, as opposed to just like ending it here, because he's so obsessed with this war. And as a result, so are the Lost Boys, right? They just get, that's like, I think maybe there's like a message about movements too, how you can be baited into mirroring back and becoming equally obsessed with those tactics. Like, then they get obsessed with the war too.
Do they?
Yeah, because they come back and they fight. They train him to like come back and like fight the war.
They prepare for the war. They have a great training montage where they get all of their like fun little bespoke little weapons together, all their little bamboo weapons and shit.
One of which is a mirror, by the way, based on what you just said.
But I would push back and say that
the white light.
I would say that the big difference between Hook and the Pirates and the Lost Boys is that like the Lost Boys is like a real community, you know, like they, like all they want to do. And we, you know, like we have criticisms on like the gendered aspects of it and how violent that their play is. But Hook, by contrast, and that was something that stuck out on this watch for me, was just, so if we're going with this metaphor of like, you know, Hook is the pirate, Peter Banning is the pirate in his business world. You know, for Hook, he wants the Great War because he just wants the next big thing. He wants like the next like dopamine hit. You know, he is not satisfied with being present. Right. He is not satisfied with his community of pirates. The most intimate relationship he has is with Smee, and he basically treats Smee like his, you know, bed servant. And then we have like, it's played for laughs, and and we could have the whole Dustin Hoffman conversation as well, but he is fucking phenomenal in this movie. And
my
the
God.
scene where he threatens to commit suicide, like this is a manic depressive man who has nothing, has no love in his life, has no community, has nothing grounding him. So all he has to look forward to is like the next act of violence that he can commit against someone that'll make him feel anything. He's feeling nothing, which I thought was it's tragic. Yeah, so like I don't want to root it too much in like parents, because like the whole like mother father dichotomy is like that's also can be limiting. There's so many different types of family structures, community structures.
Yes.
But like
Sure.
above all else, like Hook he hasn't done the work. He hasn't done the reading. He hasn't done the work. He's still just out there flailing around. Just like if I kill enough people, maybe I will feel whole.
But in defense of Hook,
So
I
good.
feel like I felt like at the end, that's what I'm saying. If I was going to rewrite it, I wanted him to get what he wanted. Like maybe that would have been too cheesy, but I wanted him to be healed by like maybe the community of Lost Boys could have taken him in. Maybe he just like, in all fairness, Peter did take his hand. Like violence was
Yeah.
because this isn't like they weren't not provoking, like where are we at? Like he doesn't have a hand. He's pissed. He doesn't have mom and dad. He doesn't have his community. Like maybe if they could have like, I just felt like there was a moment for that little boy to come up and mush his face too and be like, there you are. That would have been my like. I know critics would be like cheesy, but like that's my vision for Hook. Instead, he gets eaten up again.
No, that's why I love like villain origin stories to understand like where Hook came from. Like what
Yeah.
how do you get to Hook? Sometimes for me is helpful.
Well, I found also like the clock imagery and metaphor very interesting, and I was like trying to link that. I was like, what is the clock to Hook? And I think at least my interpretation was that like the clock is literally ticking down his time alive. So it's just like a constant reminder of his mortality. And because his life is so unsatisfying to him, it's like a terrifying reminder of just how empty his life is. Whereas like contrasted by the Lost Boys, who seem to have no concept of time, like time also representing structure and order and whatever. It's like, they don't know what time it is. They're just waking up whenever they wake up. They're going to bed whenever they go to bed. They don't give a shit about, what time it is.
Yeah. And time being like father time a lot, I know we're trying to get off the parentals, but I think that there is something also in Hook having this broken relationship with father time, and also this notion of make time stand still is interesting to me, because also on a spiritual level, on some sort of like quantum physical maybe, or something level, we're able to have a conversation about simultaneous time and like what's actually happening, if this is all a dream, but what's happening in the waking state, and how is one thing, how is one cause affecting another reality, and all of that stuff. I'm interested in that because time seems to stand still for the Lost Boys as well.
Yeah, and not even, and it's in a way that's sad too. Like I appreciate that. I think that sadness is a little bit in there, where it's like actually aging is natural, and there's something that doesn't feel natural about staying in Neverland that feels missed, like it is stunted, and that, like you were saying, Maggie being kind of the heartbeat, the truth teller, is like, no, we're getting the hell out of here. I gotta go grow up. Like, I'm not gonna like stay here, Dad. That's weird. It was fun for you to be in tights for like a day.
Yeah, like what?
We're going home.
There is something avoidant about choosing to stay in Neverland and remain a lost boy forever. But at the same time, it's like, that seems like the more pure, like compared to the pirates, that's definitely a much purer, honest, like human way of living than what the pirates are doing.
Well, there's that I think that's why that scene of like, you don't lose that. It's like, how do you, now Peter's going to go home and keep that and not forget Neverland and not forget that and keep that energy and, hopefully make better choices, keeping the child inside, but also not staying back. Like there was needing to kind of be aware of that and present, but also be a dad, because that's his happy thought.
I always find it so crazy. I know it's corny, but it's like I always find it so crazy how the M turned upside down becomes the W for we. You know,
Mm.
it's like
Mm-hmm.
it really tends to
Mm-hmm.
be about like making sure that I am able to turn that M upside down so that the letter can receive. It becomes grooves, like
Mm.
it becomes pockets where you can receive the gifts of others, where you can receive food from another. I'm always reminded of that story of that table that is filled with those humans or those people that can't eat the food in front of them because their utensils are too long,
Mm-hmm.
but
Mm.
then there's another table with the same situation and they're just struggling to eat. But then there's this table where they're just like, oh, I can't feed myself with this long utensil, so I'll take from this plate and feed you. And we're all fed because I'm using the utensils that were given to me to feed you. Over there on the hell table or at the capitalism table, they're struggling
Mm-hmm.
or
Mm-hmm.
finding ways or using inventions and technology to feed themselves only. And I think the movie reminds me of that too. That won't work. It won't work. You know, it can be discouraging out here in these streets sometimes. You know, capitalism is a sickness and it really is intense. Like it really, 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 really shows up everywhere.
Yeah.
I mean, I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but I'm like, you know, I think a lot of, as I've been like sharing sacred space with community, like we've really been trying to understand how to help those who have made peace with it, have made peace with capitalism, don't even understand that there are some who do and are like, I don't care, like, you know, because I need this now. And I think that that's where time also comes into play because of the urgency. And I hold myself accountable. I can be I had to grow, and I'm constantly growing more and more patient, but I can be very impatient, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and urgent. And sometimes because there's demands in community, but also sometimes because there's demands in my own life, you
Mm-hmm.
know, and I have to
Mm.
remember that I am a part of an eternal fabric. I am a part of a legacy of ancestry. I am a part of a longer, greater story, and I'm just playing my small part. And I think when I'm able to remember that, I'm able to be released into a more communal, more plural, more I got you, I got me, we got we space.
Larry, I'd love to hear if you had if there's like something that sticks out in your memory through your time as an artist where you had like some sort of epiphany about, I don't know, your art making and maybe how capitalism, the system, the quote unquote industry, how that has like in how that has influenced your perspective and then how you broke out of that. Because that's something we talk about a lot on this podcast. I know for me personally, when I was in LA pursuing comedy writing and, you know, and performing there,
All
uh,
right.
you know, I felt by the time I left LA, I felt so shitty. I just like being in the business of it and not, you know, not achieving the things that, you know, we all have to achieve, like really had a major like emotional impact on me. And it wasn't until I actually learned more about capitalism and the system and how it's structured where I was like, oh, like it's the system's built to make you feel shitty. Like it's an inherently exploitative and oppressive system. And so just like having that realization was, it felt like becoming Peter Pan again, where I was like, oh, that's right, like I don't have to feel this way, like it's not my fault, like it's all this stuff was put upon me. So I'm curious, have you ever had any sort
Mm.
of like big epiphany in that sense?
I have to be honest, you know what? Number one, I honor your journey. I think you have such an incredible story that continues to unfold, both of y'all. And I just am so proud of y'all, first of
Mm.
all. And not that like I'm proud, like have the authority to be or whatever to be proud. I'm saying it like, wow, proud to be in community with those kinds of
Mm.
humans. I love that. I find it that I am always having the epiphanies, and this is something that can somehow that this could really actually be a source of like insecurity sometimes for me, quite frankly, just to be real, because I feel like I am making mistakes. I'm always learning, and so Angela Davis and some of the folk I really look up to and read, James Baldwin and different people who have come before, my own family members. It's like I feel you can't truly fight for liberation or be anti whatever the dominating system is without making mistakes. And I think that for me, like you're gonna mess
Yeah.
up. Like you're going, and I don't want to, because I have been in training programs, in communities, in coalitions, in church programs, in all types of camps and schoolings, and where me messing up literally felt like it, in a lot of ways, where it was social death or some sort of death was involved. And there's my nervous system sometimes doesn't feel like it can weather a mistake on that level and in that space, but it has, and it can. And I have to continue to understand and be encouraged by my lived experience. So the epiphanies that I continue to make around that, like, I think it's similar to yours, like coming out of Carnegie Mellon, right? Graduating, winning the Roth Living Acting Award senior year, coming out, getting an agent. I came out in 2008. So there was like, these strikes and the market crashing and this and that, but I still found a way to like get my equity card at a theater that I ended up doing a play called Brokeology that was literally speaking to the things we're talking about. And I don't know. I just found it that I did not need what I thought I needed to be who I always was meant to be, which I'm always learning who that is. But what I'm saying is like I just, yeah, I thought I was supposed to be the next Denzel. That's what literally was told to me so many times. And I don't want to be him. Child, I don't. I don't want, I have to be Larry. Like, I am so different anyway. Like, I can't be him. Like, and no shade, to be honest, like most of them they don't even be fucking with me. Like, because I'm too like different, or even beyond just me being openly queer. But like, I'm also in the gender thing and then this thing. And it's like, well, this nigga is too much. You know what I mean? That's that's the vibration. That's not even the vibration I get. That's the actual like words. That's the actual energy. That's the actual like physical, like, hey man, when you be on Facebook, like literally like doing this to me, but then they're the ones that, have the privilege to continue to thrive and give me opportunity, and I continue to feel those daddy issues. That's those daddy issues, even in industry. So there's a long way to answer your question of like, I find it that there was a time, I think, training, like where I would have to learn how to be a straighter Black man in my acting. And then coming into an industry where that actually was, it was reinforced that I needed to be that in order to be viable, in order to be successful. And the more I said, no, I must be myself to fly. Like, no, I am this, I am that. Like you were saying in the beginning, uncompromising. And this is what you were picking up on. I have felt like I've compromised in order to get a little piece of the pie. But then when I ate that little piece of the pie, it made me sick. It made me sick because it was from the kitchen of capitalism. And eating that pie was no good for me. And sometimes I forget. And sometimes I forget. Like, I forget when I'm like, okay, I'm going to get these classes out there. I'm going to get these classes so that I can fund these projects that's doing this work in the community and da-da-da-da. And then a friend is like, you need to do this class. They need to be this price. You're undercharged and da-da-da. And then so I put out these classes at like the regular price that you will find in other spaces that are very, very expensive, way totally too expensive. But I'm like, never mind. No, it's open to all. Anyone can come. It's those ways I waver. I think it can look like I'm wavering, but really, my sense of abolition, my sense of anti-capitalism, it's from a space. It's not from a book for me. It's from a lived experience. Those books are helpful, and the readings are necessary, and the communities are necessary, and the teachers are necessary. But for me, I'm like, I think this is really just who I am and how I am, and I cannot create in a box of you must do this in order to get successful.
Mm-hmm.
You must do this in order to be branded well, in order for you to get money. It doesn't work for me. It never is successful, even if it's just the most successful I've been is when I've spoken my truth. It's when I have said exactly what I needed to say, how I needed to say it, period.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I answered your question, but that's what was on my heart to say.
Yeah. No.
That was beautiful.
No, that was honestly, thank you so much for sharing all that. That was beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
So I would distill that into like you've been having like a rolling Peter Pan experience.
Please distill.
Like,
Yeah.
rolling Peter Pan discoveries throughout your life and your career. Just like always refining and learning more about who you are, and not letting, you said like the box. I felt like the box of someone else's expectations be built around you and your
love
work.
that.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, there was so much there, and
Yes.
like what really resonated was just, I think it's really important that you voiced what comes up when we make mistakes,
Mm-hmm.
but that mistakes are the inevitable part of being in process. And I think so many people stay in theory because and I'm speaking from experience, like I know the stronghold because like you said, there are real consequences to making mistakes. However, we have to, because some of the consequences are actually really positive. You learn, you grow stronger, you recognize what feels good, what doesn't feel good. And I think one of the hardest parts to overcome, but one of the most liberating parts is like, I'm just going to try. And I'm also going to have some radical acceptance for myself in my mistakes. And that's what I heard you saying, and that's actual practice, and in my sort of journey further into Marxism, that's what a lot is kind of like, that practice and praxis is so important. It's not just about theory. Theory then becomes ideological, not material. And you have to be trying these things in community, in spaces where, oh, okay, that didn't work. How can I be accountable? Then move forward. Like, I think that's so real to say, like, oh, I tried these prices. I heard this thing. I'm a human being in this system too, trying to just make it as well. And then I put that price out. It didn't feel right. I put another price out. Maybe those things change, that it's just us trying things, and that a huge part of this, how we move forward. And speaking of imagination, is also just like trying, like,
Mm-hmm.
trying different happy words to make you fly. Like, what is going to be the thing that works?
Yeah,
what is going to be?
Try the giant slingshot. The giant slingshot doesn't work. You're gonna belly flop
Yeah.
into the paint pond.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I just, there was something both of y'all said that made me think of the journey I've been having with my project Passion. And, I had this opportunity to record 3 of my plays, which I've been working on for years, always working to audio record my plays. Because I had this vision one day in New York. I was coming down from Upper Washington Heights down to Harlem, and I heard Spirit say, record your plays and get an audience from the recordings and then do the live productions. And then so I've always just been trying to do that. And I've never just did it, right? Because I had this like perfectionism thing. I was sick with that. And then so this year I found myself having the opportunity during Pride Month and during LA Black Pride Week to record 3 of my plays at Television City on Melrose around Beverly and Fairfax, the CBS Television City, all that kind of stuff. Hugely iconic and legendary space. So blessed to be welcomed in there as a community partner, and they didn't charge, which means they don't charge you for they donate. Let me say that better. They donate, these sound stages 4 days, and I'm not about to, say, okay, I'll come back to you when I have the money to bring the team in, because I had no money. I had no relationship with these people. This came from someone I'm in community with, my friend John Adam Ross. He was like, hey, do you still need a space for your project? I said, absolutely. He connected me with her. Adina. I said I was ready to communicate in that way with that person, which I want to say that in this time and in this work, you have to do the work on yourself. So you were like, he hasn't done their work. Hook hasn't done the work. The work is also about worthiness work and deservability and all this stuff. It's about like the inside work of like, that kind of thinking of yourself in the way that capitalism counts on you not doing. And then so I went in, called my community, say, y'all, I have no resources, But what I was saying was, as I was creating 52 positions with Black and or queer and trans and gender nonconforming humans, that like, I was like, I can pay you in 30 days because I have never not been able to find the money in 30 days. But baby, well, let me tell you, it did not work out like that. And it was so hard and crushing for me to have to then ask for another 30 days. And here I am in that second 30 days. And I was towards the end of it. I am towards the end of it right now. And I had to call all the people I hadn't paid yet, which was 30 people. And I had to say, I had to ask for your forgiveness. I thought that I was going to be able to, and I'm still having a hard time finding this. A lot of people I'm going to are focused on the Harris campaign, or I am actually doing this at a time where 500 plus anti-LGBT bills are out there, and I forget that. I'm just moving pure hilarious, and I'm hit with homophobia or transphobia, not speculation, actual like hit with it. I'm like, oh, I can't go to you for that. You want to support me, but not when I'm supporting when I'm like so forwardly, representing my community, and and also just in a time where someone who gives me 1,000 or would have given me 10, and it didn't make me feel like a boss. When I talk about that, it didn't make me feel like a boss. It made me feel like I needed to be the one that was like, oh yeah, I'm raising the most money I've ever raised, 3 times the amount. Yeah, I can find it in 30 days with all this shit going on. I wasn't able to. I was able to I did raise $22,000 in a month and a half, and I was able to pay some people, a lot of people, but I wasn't able to do it all. And so in me calling these people and making that mistake and breathing through it, it actually, it makes me believe that it's worth continuing. It relieved me. I had dark nights and sleepless nights. I know we're at the end here, but I'm just saying I had stress and anxiety and debility while I was trying to put up a play for the first time as an actor in almost 7 years after leaving it from deeply traumatic situations. I haven't been on a stage like this in 7 years after being on a stage constantly every year before that for almost 10. So like I just want to say, like, I'm learning in the moment that it has to take community. It has to take we. It has to, but it is about accountability, and it won't make you feel like the boss they want you to feel like you need to be, but it will make you feel like the boss you really want to be.
Wow. And true transparency, which I think is a true like anti-capitalist value that like as you were sharing, I'm like, oh, that's what transparency is.
And vulnerability, such a huge amount of vulnerability, and something that we're taught, like, if you're the boss, no vulnerability, but like, this is the total inverse of that, where you're like, I want to take care of you, and I need to be vulnerable in order to take care of you all. Wow.
Okay, next segment. What are we going to? Next part.
Is there any other themes of Hook that we want to touch on before we move to give awards?
I did clock on this watch that all of the women want to fuck Peter in this movie, which I thought was an interesting choice.
Yeah. Tink was that was odd.
That part, I did clock that.
That was odd. What stuck out to me was Wendy, when Wendy says to him, when she's telling him that he's Peter Pan, and she's like, no other girls got your fancy like I did, and I was almost hoping that you would show up on my wedding day and a light on top of the church while we were saying our vows. And I was like, the fuck? What is happening right now? And then also so brutal that she was in love with Peter for so long, and then he shows up after 70 years and is like, yo, can I kiss your asleep granddaughter? That all was very messy to me.
Yeah, it is messy because it does. And I'm telling you, whenever I'm watching something like that, for me, as I'm always the one that the Peter is touching in the dark on the low, but would never talk about out loud. And I am also the one that grew to want that to happen and had to live through that because when there's queer erasure in the stories, you have to only imagine where it must live, and it must live in the hidden spaces that you cannot see. So if everybody want Peter Dick, what do you think is the queer people's experience? Okay? You know what I mean? Like, and I think that it's interesting to point that out because it's like there is maybe a take on the piece that's like, well, if you're going to do patriarchy, or if you are going to do masculinity, toxic masculinity, do it like this. Like, if we are going to like worship the almighty phallic symbol, like, do it this way.
One last line I had written down, just back to kind of Hook as this sort of capitalist figure. I loved the line when he says, "Lie, me, never. The truth is far too much fun." I just thought that was like a great line. I hope to be called a liar soon, just so I can pull that one out. But I also thought it was such a great, like, I think that's true of capitalism. I don't think capitalism lies. It doesn't have to, because it's having far too, because the truth is just out there.
Right.
It's bold. It's in our face. It's having far too much fun. So just as we look out for those moments where you're like, capitalism is not lying.
Right.
Often as you're watching these debates, I'm like, yeah, there's major lies being told, but there's also truths, particularly when it comes to the barefaced economic capitalist platforms like that are being pushed in our faces. There's no lie there of like how they believe that these systems should work. We know that the non-truth is that like they don't benefit us, but they are working as they're meant to, right? The truth is far too much fun. So I thought that was a great
Oh, I like that.
And
line.
I think it is. And I love that. And I think that it dovetails on what I was about to say. I was like, it needs you to fight it. Like, he needs, we kind of touched on it already, but he really needs, when Peter is walking away with his kids, he's like, I've got my objective. My super objective, it was not to fight you. It was to, get my kids.
Yeah.
That was my super want, and I've gotten my need, which my transformation in character, I understand some things in my character. So I've got my want and my need, as a protagonist. But capitalism needs the fight. It needs and wants a fight, and it will make you its enemy. And it will make you fight others. It needs to root for you to fight something else. And I was like, oh my God. That's interesting. Yeah. And that's why being an abolitionist is better, because Cook needs to go in a crocodile. You can't just stay there. And maybe you can't be rehabilitated, maybe. I don't know. Okay, another conversation.
Awesome. Then let's give this movie some well-needed awards.
Let's do it.
The first award is going to be Best Politics. This goes to the character with the best politics in the movie, and we can nominate. Well, we can nominate before voting if we feel that there's a strong contenders.
I mean, I feel like it has to be Granny Wendy, the woman who helped.
Really?
I mean, she helped like a million
all the
orphans. They're donating an entire wing of the children's hospital to her.
Mm-hmm.
Seems like an incredibly sweet woman.
Minus the "I'll watch you non-consensually."
Yeah,
kiss my granddaughter
that
in
whole
sleep.
part's fucked. Yeah, for sure.
What does it mean? Can I just ask though? Politics, best politics. I'm actually confused by the.
No, that's a great question.
We don't define it ever, so it's very loosely up to interpretation.
For me, I define it as if the person has any sort of discernible politic that either navigates their decisions that they make throughout the film, or obvious ones. For example, as sometimes the worst politics are easier to see. But if there's the idea being that maybe the personal is political, the political is personal, is there something navigating their awareness of sort of themselves as a political being, or maybe not awareness, but that they're
like any of the ideas or values that they espouse or actions that they take that demonstrate those values or ideas.
Mm-hmm. And sometimes they're easier to, sometimes we're really reaching and sometimes they're spot on. But I do think inherent. I mean, I think what I've learned from answering this question over and over with each movie is I do think that there's no such thing as a non-political human. I think that's just part of the deal with being in society, part of the we, whether you like it or not.
I think in the context of this movie, because no one's talking about, like British politics. Like no one's talking about like Labour versus the Tories, so there's not like an actual, like we're talking politics, but I don't know. There's like the family politics that are played out. I'd say another nominee would be Peter's wife, Moira, who that speech that she gives to him at the windowsill about how like there's only such a short amount of time that our kids are the one who want us around. And then we're going to have to be chasing after them for their attention. Like it's such a short time. It's so precious and you're missing it. One beautiful, beautiful performance from Caroline Goodall. But I thought she like articulated something. There was like a real value and perspective in the way that she was viewing the dynamic within her family and how it's been playing out over the last few years. So that would be like my other nominee.
Yeah, maybe politic being like defined as sort of like decisions or actions around community, like honestly, like judgments, like there's not a politic in the Lost Boys, but they make decisions about the group or they don't, and that itself is a politic. Like, is it me centered, is it we centered? But like whatever decisions, behaviors they make that are sort of affecting the world that they live in.
I love this. Thank you.
That kind of, I think that's kind of how I see. I love that you asked that question because I think it's so important to constantly be like, yeah, I use words and what are we saying?
Yeah,
but
I always use that
that's
word.
what
I don't know what that word meant.
I think that's what I'm getting at. I think
Yeah.
that's like what is like why I think that sometimes you can be like, well, I don't vote, so I'm not political. But that being non-political still has a political effect.
It's gonna be pockets for me.
Oh, pockets.
It's going to be pockets for me. It's going to be pockets for me. And it's such a political moment in the community. Like when Rufio draws a line in the sand.
Oh, yeah.
And he's like lobbying. And like he's like, no, this is Peter. Like, there you are, Peter.
That's...
Yeah, what is he? Yeah, that's a really good one.
You're right, because he goes against the grain. He's like, he's doing on the ground organizing in a way. He's like, look, it's like, look, I know no one agrees with me. I'm gonna be the boots on the ground person that's like, we're gonna figure this out and we're gonna help this sad sack out.
Yeah, no, it's got to be pockets. I'd also say Maggie, I would put out there, the little girl, because she really holds it down with like, I think she's very clear on, we're going home. We're not going to stay. Neverland is not the place to get it done. We must grow up. While Maggie's nominated, I will go with Pockets. Pockets is the clearest to me.
You won me over to Pockets side.
Yeah, I'm a little shocked that Peter doesn't hand down the sword.
Yes.
It's a little bit.
That's me too. Why did that happen? I need to know. That's where I was left. I was like, I don't know if it's because he was the more sort of bigger kid, and they needed the line to say, watch
Yeah.
everyone that's smaller than you. I don't know, but
I was also aware of just like the amount of fat shaming, like just that amount of
Yeah.
language. And I thought that was just important. Again, one of the reasons I love watching movies like this, that I'm like, this shaped my brain at this age. There's so many things happening. You have so many young people watching this, and you're not necessarily critical of it. You're like, that's just, oh, okay, we're just making fun of being fat, and fat is bad, and we have to, and old. And then they have this kid who's bigger. It was just such a I just clocked that as such a 90s thing, but I know that it shaped my relationship to my body so traumatically, and those are just not small things, and it just makes me sad when I think about all, what that it does to kids to have to move through that language. It was like a lot of, I was like, okay.
Yeah, I'm glad you pointed that out, because I also clocked that. Yeah, a lot of fat shaming happening across all the multiple characters throughout the whole movie.
Yeah, they could all agree on that, like Pirates, Lost Boys.
All right, Larry, so our next award is, you may have guessed it, is worst politics. This might be a little bit easier. This goes to the character with the worst politics in the movie.
It was definitely Peter Banning's at the beginning.
Yeah.
Like
pre-rediscovery.
He's like mergers and acquisitions, and like clearly like doing really, what is he was good? Oh, that stuff with the owl. Like he was getting ready for the $5 billion deal to like wipe out this like species of owl.
Oh yeah, and he's like, can't they just mate somewhere else?
I'm going with Peter Banning's.
Yeah,
I think that's a brilliant.
Yeah, that was pretty shitty.
I mean, doesn't come to Jack's game.
Yeah, but no, he does come, but he was late.
He comes when he's late.
He's late. And then I think Larry, you made a good point about Hook's. We have to nominate Hook, because Hook will be sad not to get any nomination. And I think you made a good point of like so captures that like the selfish capitalist leader.
Yeah.
And what happens when you're so obsessed with war and me.
Yeah. But and at least though, I know who Hook is. That's why I think Peter is the one who wins, because Peter is not actually being who they are.
Yep.
And the Hook at least is purely who they are, even if they aren't, but I know what like they are.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
really out there.
And Hook's having some fun, He's having a little bit of fun with how terrible he is. Peter Banning is having zero fun all of the time.
Yeah, Peter Banning sucks. All right. And our last award goes to Best Supporting Character or Spinoff. This is the character that this movie should actually be about, or who we would like to see a full movie about. I'll just throw out a double winner. Pockets, to me, I could see that whole, like, there's so many places. Isaiah, the actor who played Pockets, that actor is needed for that role.
I know my answer. I want, because it's part of the conversation we've had, I want the Lost Boys movie, but I want the Lost Boys to find and meet the lost girls or the lost children or the lost non-male gendered group of people that are also, they're in Neverland somewhere. It can't just all be boys. So like, I want to see the reckoning. I want to see the different lost children integrate and become one lost community. I was watching this movie with a friend last night, a female friend, and she was like, where are the lost girls? I was like, I don't know where the lost girls are. She's like, you know where they are? They're probably in some other part of Neverland, just not dealing with this drama. Just they're just like, we're not getting involved in all that business. So that's what I would want to see.
Same. I think that led by Pockets. I think that I want Pockets, the Pocket story, which teaches us who the lost children are, the lost folk.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I liked you brought up backstory, Larry. And there's so many. This is what I love about it, is like there's so, I want to know like the lost, all the like the Lost Boys backstories. How did they all get there? Because Peter's backstory, even that whole, I was like, that's crazy. Yeah. He decided to run away as an infant.
Yeah.
He rolled himself.
Yeah.
Wow.
He elected to push his own pram down the hill.
Yeah. But I love that part too. I did want to speak briefly about that part, like, because it was clear that it was an orphanage moment happening, right? It was clear that the baby was being given away, but this is what the fantasy
Yeah.
version of. And I feel like it was so brilliant. That's how you tell a story. It was, the metaphor was
Yes.
like, yes, it's not just a fantasy for fantasy's sake. It's like, it was a
Right.
way to explain the hard shit to talk about in this exchange
Yeah.
experience. It's deep.
Larry,
It's a deep
such a deep movie. I'm so glad. Larry, thank you so much for suggesting this
Yeah.
movie, for your time, for your mind, for your heart, for being with us here.
For being with us. And also I just want to say it is so special because you alluded to this, that like I'm so proud of both of you also. And it's that kind of, I think that like pride that you talked about that's rooted in having, I mean, talk about time, but like when you have the privilege of being in community with people over a span of time, I guess this comes back to this theme of like why growing up is so special, that like I would never want to be stuck in 2006 with all of you, but like, you know what I mean? Not just because it's 2006, but like that it's so, I think that's what I'm discovering about, because I guess we didn't really get into it, but like the fear of aging in our culture and our society is so real. And so I'm sure if we did like a reversion of this, like Peter or whoever would go back and they'd have like their face just so much done to it to avoid aging. And the Lost Boys would be like, couldn't even mold it. Like, what? But like we get to grow and see these different phases in each other's lives. And I think I'm just so grateful for that, and to be able to have that kind of long-term community. And it's one of the things that I just think aging is so incredible.
I love
and
it.
I embrace, because I do have a lot of fears about aging because I'm a product of this culture and I have to fight it. And I think that is something that's so awesome.
Larry, the last thing we like to ask our guest, I mentioned it up top, is there one thing or multiple things, whatever comes to mind, where a place in your everyday life where you get the chance to practice your values, like your political values, your moral values, your ethical values, anti-capitalist values. I know it's imbued in almost all of your work that you do, but if this could be anything. This could be your work. This could be like, oh, I volunteer with this organization, or like, oh, I try to thrift my clothing. It just could be anything. So what does that inspire for you?
Yeah, it definitely, and this is, I think, is just spotlights how much of a workaholic I can be, and which I need to sort of like, correct sometimes. But it definitely though does show up in my collaborative processes, like in the writers' rooms I'm in, or this show that I'm in. One example yesterday, some Aria
Oh, wow.
came to our opening and tagged me in a vid of the bows, on Instagram. And so I went and I saw one cast member not have space to bow. Like he had to like go like this, and the next day, yesterday, I was like, my friend, I was like, do you have to always do that? And he was like, yeah, it's always happening like that. I was like, what? No, you need to have space, like to bow. And then like this whole thing happened. And of course, I was like, oh my God, y'all, I'm not trying to make a thing, because that's what happens when you advocate as well. Like the reason why people aren't doing it, like the dust in the attic sort of like flies around for a second. And, but now he always has a place to bow. And I think that's how it shows up, like in any organization or group or space I'm in, whether it's like where I'm living, or if I'm on the bus, or I'm on the train, or I'm on the plane. I'm going to advocate for someone else's liberation, safety, security, and peace. And sometimes I'm the one that had to talk to myself. Sometimes I'm the one like, Larry, what are you doing? What are you giving? And so like that. I mean, I wish it could be more simple, like, oh, I only thrift things or this and that, but it's not giving that all the time for me. It's giving.
No, that's real.
And that's the beauty.
Real life human shit.
And that's the beauty of this.
That's the beauty.
And being, not conforming to these systems, is that there's no right answer. So that was a perfect answer. Thank you.
I think it also just, because I love that you asked like about our awards and what is politic. And I think that's a great example. It's like there's things that you become aware of that change your point of view, and therefore your awareness and how you move through the world is changed, and thus the actions you take are changed, you know? And I think that's kind of like, that's it, right? It's like some people, and that's why I have faith that you can change people's political point of view and they can have a giant shift and suddenly be oh, I didn't realize that like voting this way or like helping in this way or being a part of going out on the street to help protest actually has an impact on other people's lives. And when they make those connections or have an awakening around Gaza and what that means for collective liberation, it transforms the actions that they take, and it transforms how you see the world. And those little moments, which are really crucial. Oh, I noticed you didn't have space. And it's not only about making space for you because I believe that you need to bow, but like it's a bigger than that, is what I heard in that. It's bigger than that. And that's why I'm going to advocate.
Yes.
Yeah.
Taking the time to know, to tell my mom, that's not your fight. I said, no, it is, because it is directly connected to how you are being policed, Mom. It is directly connected to the criminalization of our youth and the preschool to prison pipelines and the deaths of my trans, Black, and queer siblings. It's connected to all of our things. It's all connected, you know. And so I love that when you just said that, because I cannot not advocate, because in me seeing that, being complicit in my silence and actually having my silence be violent, I'm doing it to myself. I'm making a cause that will have an effect.
Right.
You know? So
it's beautiful.
Y'all, please stop. I'm about to start another podcast.
Larry,
we're so grateful to have you on.
Yeah,
we'll have you back.
And just want to remind our audience, if they want to support Larry's work, they can find him at powellhousearts.com. That's POWELL housearts.com. Larry, so beautiful to see you. Thank you so much.
You too, Frank.
Thank you.
I love y'all. Thank you.
Thank you all so much for listening. Make sure to follow us on Instagram and TikTok. And if you want to support the show and get access to our Patreon episodes, the link is in the episode description in your podcast player or at mvcpod.com.
Also, if you are part of a leftist or progressive organization that would like to advertise on Movies vs. Capitalism, we donate our ad space for free. So you can shoot us an email at moviesversuscapitalism@gmail.com. That's moviesvscapitalism@gmail.com.
For next week, we'll be watching the 1975 medieval comedy Monty Python and the Holy Grail.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.